this real quick. Sorry. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Morgan. I'm a volunteer with AARP Maryland. I focus on fraud and consumer protection issues. And this is another in our conversations that we've been having throughout the year with senior legal services on different topics. Today's topic is debt collection. It's the holidays. I know you people out there are racking up major debts trying to get Christmas presents. And so this would be a really good time to have someone who's an authority on the issues regarding debt collection. So with me today is Jane Santoni. She is a partner in the law firm of Santoni, Vacci, and Ortega. And she's been practicing law and getting it right since 1986. And she's been handling consumer issues and debt collection defense since 2002. So 20 years of experience there. And she still finds time to volunteer with Senior Legal Services, which is awesome. Jane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Karen. It's nice to be here.
And debt collection is a huge issue, especially when as you get older and your income becomes more limited. Senior Legal Services provides pro bono legal services mainly for Baltimore residents who are ages 60 and older, I believe. But today we want to talk about just issues relating to debt collection that anyone can sort of learn about no matter where they are in the state of Maryland. So let's talk about people who are 50 and older. I mean, they may be getting towards the end of their careers, or they may be getting ready to retire, which means you're shifting from income coming in, on a regular basis to fixed income, where you may shift to having a check only once a month, and you have to manage your budget from that standpoint. So what are some ways that people who are 50 and older or 60 and older, how can they protect themselves from getting into debt to begin with?
Well, I think that one of the things to keep in mind, and it's a really difficult lesson for seniors, is to put the head before the heart, because when you get to be our age, I'll say my age, and
north. We can say our. It's okay.
North of 50. If you're fortunate, you have a lot of people in your life who you really love and who you've raised and who depend on you. And sometimes with seniors, they are particularly vulnerable in that those same people who you love so much may be looking to you for financial help. So one of the things that I think is unique to seniors is to keep in mind that your income is limited, and your children and your grandchildren's income is not limited. So they have often, if you're retired especially, or on disability, that number that you're getting, other than cost of living increases, or if the stock market goes up, if you're lucky enough to have that, your earning capacity is finite. And so when people who you love come to you and they want you to co-sign a loan or lend them money or buy them something, it's very difficult to say no, because they love you and you love them. But the fact of the matter is, they, just because of their age, have more ability to earn income than you do. And so it's important to use your head in determining whether or not you really can afford or should afford to help the people who may be coming to you for money. And that also includes the co-signing of a loan. a lot of times people will say, oh, just put your name on it. It's okay. I'm going to take care of the car payments, or I'm going to pay off the credit card or whatever.
Or
And
the tuition, Jane.
or the tuition. And hopefully that's true. But once you co-sign that loan, you are legally responsible. And you're not legally responsible for half of it. You're legally responsible for the whole darn thing if they don't pay.
Yep.
So, and with tuition, student loans are now they're trying to change the laws on student loans, if you've heard about that in the news. But student loans are like debts on steroids. Under the current system, you can't get rid of them in bankruptcy. You can't, the statute of limitations doesn't run on them. I mean, they're monsters. You can't get rid of them. So the biggest piece of advice is think twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times before you agree to either buy things for other people, no matter how much you love them, co-sign for anything for other people, or go into debt in any way for somebody else.
Yeah, it seems to me when a loved one, and I mean, of course you want to help. Of course you do. And they probably don't even want to ask you, except that they feel like they don't have any other alternatives. So there are a lot of emotions going on here. But to me, when as an elder person, when you're being asked that, you have to presume that the debt will not be paid by the person who's asking you. So then the question is, let me assume that the debt's not paid. What is my plan B? Like, can I afford to pay this debt in total? And if I can easily say yes to that, then maybe I will just go ahead and co-sign and hoping that won't happen, but knowing that I'm prepared in case it does. But if that doesn't happen, then to me, the other question is, what is your plan B? What happens when you get into trouble financially, when debt collectors come calling you? Where are you going to go for extra money? Will you be able to go back to that family member? The answer is probably no.
Probably
and that's
no.
the problem.
Right. And one of the things you may want to consider, as opposed to co-signing anything, is I think you're right. I think if you do co-sign something, and look, I've co-signed things for family members, but in the back of your mind, you should say, all right, if this goes south, I'm going to be responsible for the whole thing. Go in with both eyes open. Another alternative may be to give a check. If you want to help, give cash or give a check, because that way it's gone. Give it as a gift. It's gone, but it does not obligate you down the road. Once you sign that legal document, you're obligated down the road. So you want to give a one-time gift if you're feeling generous and they're desperate, by all means. But co-signing is dangerous. So
it really can be.
Yeah.
I mean, what if you want to refinance your house because, and because you could, reduce your mortgage, but because this debt is outstanding, now you can't get the low interest rate you were hoping for because your credit report is showing an unfavorable debt to income ratio because because you signed for that, and trying to help out a family member.
Yeah. And saying that you're just a co-signer, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It is your loan. It is your loan.
Yeah, you're basically offering to take that on. So, I've been asked. There have been members of my family that have been asked, and and in most of those situations, it's like, well, can we afford to take on the whole loan? And the answer was no. I really can't. I wish I could, but I can't.
Especially if you're on a fixed income. And
especially if you're on a fixed income.
If these people really love you, A, they're going to love you anyway, and B, they're going to find another way. So
because it's their debt. It's their debt, and ultimately they're supposed to have responsibility for their debt. They're not supposed to be sharing their debt with their grandparents or their aunts and uncles or cousin or whoever it is.
Right. You don't have to be their bank. You can love them without being their bank. And that actually, even in the holiday season, one of the things, in addition to co-signing for other people, is just a desire to be generous. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I was thinking about, I know we were talking about in preparing for this, um, some people will go into tremendous debt on their own just to buy gifts to show love. And um,
Mm-hmm.
the older I get, I'm a firm believer that most of the time it's not the monetary or items that show the love, but just to be with the people you love. So, you know, another piece of advice is think twice before you take on tremendous debt for Christmas gifts or other things. You don't have to. They're going to love you anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, birthday presents or yeah, and people it's very seductive because for one, we're getting the advertising, and you can ship for free and we're running a special and you know that your cute little, cousin or niece or nephew just, would just love having the whatever it is, the bike, the scooter, the whatever. And I mean, yeah, they will and but if they don't have it, life goes on, but but you being in their lives is far more important,
I mean,
and we don't say that enough, I don't think.
well, and if you take a few minutes and you think about your happiest memories with the people you love, I mean, when I think about it, and my grandparents are gone, my parents are gone, it was it was the Christmas cookie baking parties we'd have. It was my father putting on his Italian songs and making Italian cookies. Which cost what's the price of a bag of flour and some butter? I mean, it's the stuff that was bought over the years. It doesn't matter one tenth as much as is the time together, and that's what most people crave. So while you're thinking about what do I buy, that might not be the most important thing, especially so that you can avoid that desperation in January when the bills come in.
Right. And if you'd rather spend money than actually spend the time with the family member, that's another conversation. So, you know, it's like, Dad, I'll buy you this if you don't sing at Christmas time. How about that? No, no. That's what I might say to my dad. It's like, what can I buy you? but um, but yeah, I mean, I remember even being younger, just being in that situation myself where I would go into debt to buy Christmas presents for family, or say if I went on a trip, I made it my point to do all the Christmas shopping. And I would invariably end up with more debt, hundreds of dollars of debt because I did all that stuff at once. And it's like, well, this is unique and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know that anybody can lay their hands on anything that I got them from this trip or that trip. I can't lay hands on half the crap I bought from my own trips, you know.
Yeah. It's the
But
experiences. It's being together. It's the experiences. And it's like you said, it's seductive. It's really hard. But in talking about trying to stay out of debt, it's just one more thing to really think about. What kind of experiences can we have that don't require me going into, debt that is just agonizing in January? Because you don't need it.
mhm.
They don't care.
They
Most
don't. They don't. You're absolutely right. So let's talk more about the burden of debt. And we have a question in the chat. How can you take care of paying off medical debts you may accumulate on behalf of an older person?
So it depends. You are not liable for it at all if you didn't sign for it. Sometimes the medical providers will come after family members, but if you didn't agree to pay for your family member, it's not your responsibility. There are programs that assist it with medical debt. I think we have Karen. We have some resources, the Senior Legal Services, some other organizations that can help. One of the things that I know I used to do years ago when I was involved in medical debt collection, believe it or not, was we had somebody on staff who would actually help people get their state and federal benefits. So people
No.
may
Okay.
actually uh, be able to tap into those. And so usually the hospitals will have social workers and medical billing experts in actually on staff who can help access those funds. So
Mhm.
that's another way.
Okay. And another comment in the chat was, somebody here is saying maybe take out life insurance for children's student loans. Do you think that's a good idea?
I am not aware that life insurance can cover student loans. I mean, I guess if you think you've only got a few years left and you think this would be a gift to your, say your grandchildren, that they're a beneficiary of the life insurance, then, by all means. Now, sometimes, if they have certain amounts of money, then they may not qualify for grants or loans. So it's a little more complicated, but that's one way, and that costs you very little, and that's a gift that you can give them after you pass.
Mhm. Mhm. Because if the owner of the policy dies, the loan will be paid off, I guess, possibly.
Well, I wasn't thinking about it. In other words, let's say you have $100,000 in life insurance and the beneficiary is a grandchild. You pass, the grandchild gets $100,000 that they can
Mm.
then use to pay off their debt.
Yeah, right. Okay. Okay. That can definitely work.
I'm not aware of any program where you can directly tie the two together. There may be something out there, but I haven't heard of it.
So, yeah, so we're probably talking about just somebody, a beneficiary on the policy. And
Right.
then once you go to the great beyond, then that person then that person gets the benefits. And the other advantage of life insurance is that it's not a probate issue. So it's not
Right.
something you have to deal with the courts about necessarily, unless other issues come up. So if a person who's 50 and older, say they're retired or they're getting ready to retire and they do have debt, because I mean, I do read those stories in, like, in the media, in my news feed about I paid off my mortgage, my life is so great, I don't have any debt, but there are other people who definitely have debt. So what protections are there?
So there are lots of protections. So and by the way, it's one of those things. I've talked to many people, especially people who are older. It's distressing. It's an embarrassment. You are not alone. I don't have statistics at my fingertips, but I will tell you that many of us are in debt. And so you're not alone. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And it's definitely not something to hide, your neck in the sand if you have the issue. First off, if somebody is coming after you for a debt, you do have some protections. There are federal and state protections. For example, they can't call you between the hours of 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Or is that, I'm sorry, 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Yes. So they can't call you during those hours. They can't call your family members. They can't call your employers. They can't call your pastor. They essentially, the debt collector can't do anything to embarrass you. And if they try to do that, then they're violating federal law, and
Mhm.
there are penalties to them for doing that. You have every right to say to a debt collector, "Stop calling me," and they have to stop. And you may want to put that in writing to the debt collector: "Stop calling me, cease all communication," and that at least stops the harassment that a lot of people feel. The phone keeps ringing off the hook, ringing off the hook. You don't have
Mhm.
you do not have to be subject to that. Again, that's federal law protects you for that from that. Um, a lot of times people are very quick to admit they owe debts that they may not owe. For example,
Right.
I've had clients who had medical debt that was more than 3 years old. Well, there's something called the statute of limitations, which means a debt collector most of the time can't sue you for a debt that's more than 3 years old. So let's say you had surgery, 10 years ago. The time for them to collect on that debt has passed. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
admit that you owe it. Sometimes people will come after you for the debts of someone else. And unless you're a co-signer, it's not your debt. It's not, or they'll try to talk you in to agreeing to pay for the debt of someone else. If it's not
Mm-hmm.
your debt, you have no legal obligation. So those are just a few things. Sometimes they'll have the numbers wrong, or they'll have you mixed up with somebody else. So be very careful about admitting to a debt collector that the debt is yours, unless you are 100% sure that it is. And be very, very, very careful about agreeing to pay anything, because I've seen it, they will relentlessly hound you. Well, can you pay me
Mm-hmm.
$50? Can you pay me $100? Let's come up with a payment plan. Will you give me your credit card? Can I take this out of your bank account?
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
I'm not saying you should never do that, but unless there's a judgment against you, you don't have to do any of that. So you want to take a breath. You don't have to talk to them. And you can, with a clear head, think about, what can I afford to pay? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you should offer if you really owe the debt and you don't have any of the defenses we talked about. Realistically, what can I pay? I mean, bankruptcy is always an option. Now, some people would rather die than declare bankruptcy, but it exists for a reason. It exists for
Mm-hmm.
a reason, and that is, if you just really, for whatever reason, and most of the time, hardworking, honest people have to declare bankruptcy because their life situation just has changed. I mean, that's the overwhelming cause for.
Medical debt can torpedo your budget plan in a New York minute.
So that's an option. And sometimes um, the realistic threat of bankruptcy may make a debt collector more reasonable in working with you. The other thing to keep in mind is, and this is really important, if you have a pension or are collecting Social Security, that money cannot be used even if there's a judgment against you. Okay. So that money is
Oh.
protected money.
Huh.
So you do not have to, they can't, the debt collectors can't get that money anyway. So, whether or not you offer it is up to you, but they can't get it. Now, if you own a house, that if you have other assets, let's say
Mm-hmm.
to your pension or your Social Security, you have money in a savings account,
Right.
or you own a house, if they get a judgment against you, they can go after those things. So you may want to consider using some of your Social Security or pension funds to pay off the debt, because you don't want to lien on your house. But
Right.
know the difference, know what they can touch and what they can't touch. I mean, a lot of our clients, they're renters, they don't have other bank accounts, they don't own a home, and all their income is Social Security or pension. If that's the case, you may just want to say, I'm sorry, I can't pay you, and if you get a judgment against me, you still won't get anything,
Right.
because they
Right.
won't.
Can't get blood from a turnip, as they say.
Right.
And I think I just want to emphasize something that you said a few minutes ago about not acting out of anxiety. This is what we at AARP Maryland, we tell people from a fraud perspective, don't act out of anxiety. Well, the same thing applies to debt collections. Even if you owe the debt, you don't have to agree to anything immediately. You can say to this person, I need to think about it. I need to talk about it with my family members. I'll call you back. Because I think the other thing that's a problem is that once you make a payment, isn't it true that that sort of creates like a foundation that you actually are adopting the debt, that you actually, intend to pay this debt, that it's really your debt once you make a payment?
Well, the laws have changed a little bit on that. It used to be that
Okay.
even if the debt was too old and you made a pay, like say it was more than 3 years old, if you made a payment, you actually restarted the debt. That's not the case anymore, at least in
Oh,
Maryland,
good.
thank goodness. But if you start paying, especially if you give them information about your bank accounts or your credit card, if you start paying, that's going to be, it is problematic. And then a lot of times what the debt collectors use is aggression and shame. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be a deadbeat. Why aren't you paying this? What would your family think about you not paying this? And they are incredibly aggressive and talented in trying to push money from you. I mean, look, I'm a debt collection attorney and I have trouble dealing with the debt collectors because they're so mean and aggressive. And
Mm-hmm.
so the best thing to do is not engage with them. You don't have to engage with them. You don't have to agree to anything. Now, if you don't, you might get sued, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you do not have to subject yourself to all this harassment. And before you agree to anything, you want to take a breath, you want to take some time, and you want to see realistically what you can afford, what you think they can get, whether or not you owe it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Get the facts and get off the phone with them because
Mm-hmm.
they will never accept anything but a commitment to pay
Right.
them.
Right. Right. Um, well, one other question that we have that I'd like to cover is just besides mortgages, which I can easily see as a main cause of debt, and maybe medical debt, are there other causes of debt for people who are 50 and older?
Well, sure. I mean, anything. I think the medical debt is the most problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like we said, credit card, co-signing loans, cars, any consumer purchase can result in debt. And there are also, and it's probably a subject for another day, but things like tax liens, which is not consumer debt. So there's a whole another set of rules that apply to those. But let's say you own your house free and clear, but you're unable to pay your taxes on the house. There are some people who I think are not very nice people who will swoop in and pay the taxes, and then they actually can get title to your house. So
Yeah.
really, really awful, awful, awful. But again, there's help. The organizations that, Karen been is flashing on the screen that we're talking about can help with tax lien issues as well.
Yes, Civil Justice Center. If you're in Baltimore City, Senior Legal Services, definitely. And as we're getting ready to wrap up here, I don't want this to go past this. So if you do get sued, what do you do?
Okay, so the first thing you do is don't ignore it. Don't ignore it because if a judgment is entered against you, then even though they can't touch your Social Security or your pension, they can come after your bank accounts. They can put a lien on your house. And a judgment accrues interest at 10% a year. So do not ignore it. If you get a trial date, make sure that's marked on your calendar. Okay.
Yeah, don't miss it.
Right. The quickest thing I could say is get legal help. And again, Senior Legal Services, Civil Justice, there's the Maryland Health Help Centers. There are people who can help you if you get sued. Um, the debt collector still has to prove his case. I mean, most of the cases I handle are from people who have been sued. Just because you've been sued, it doesn't mean you don't have a defense. So,
Right.
for example, if the debt collector buys the debt from, whoever you had the debt with, and they can't prove who they bought it from, and a lot of times they can't because they'll buy these things in bulk. They'll buy 100,000
Right.
for the sake.
Aggregate.
If they can't prove who your original collector was, they can't prove you owe it. So the debt collector has the burden of proving you owe the debt, even if you get sued. It does. So if you get sued, it doesn't automatically mean you owe. You still have negotiation strength. A lot of times I
Hmm.
can get the cases dismissed just based on the fact that my client doesn't have assets. You may have those other defenses we talked about. And even if you get sued, you can still work out a payment plan. And there's actually rules, court rules that allow you to do that. What you don't want to do is bury your head in the sand, and what you don't want to do is just assume you owe the whole thing or that you have no options. You always
Right.
have options.
Well, Jane, we're going to have to leave it there, although I could happily talk with you about debt collection and evil debt collectors and things we can do for another hour easily, because it's actually interesting. And it's something that at one point or another, you're a student or you're a senior or whatever it is, you want to make sure that you have debt under control, that the debt doesn't end up owning you. So thank you so much for taking time out of your hugely busy schedule to, volunteer with Senior Legal Services and to take the time to talk to our audience about things that we can do, especially during the holiday season. It's really important not to get seduced by debt. There are things we can do to protect ourselves. So thank you.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. And you're not alone. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. We're
Right.
all in this together, and there really is help. So thank you for asking me to come on, and I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday. Don't spend too much money. It's not what the
That's
holiday.
right. I hope everyone has a happy holiday too, a happy and fiscally safe holiday season. But thank you so much, Jane Santoni. And that wraps up our last conversation with Senior Legal Services for 2022. And we want to thank Senior Legal Services for their awesome work and for these attorneys who take time out of their busy schedules to help people with issues ranging from eviction to debt collection to Real ID to fraud. So thank you, and take care. Stay safe out there. Bye.